Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And I have a video here which dates back to the late 1980s. Okay, so this is old. This is over 30 years old. But it's important. I'm going to play you a little clip from that video to give you an idea of what we're talking about.
The reality, as we have already discussed, is that the South African Communist Party controls the ANC at this stage, and that the South African Communist Party wants a one-party, dictatorial, People's Socialist Republic in South Africa. In other words, they want everything that is an anathema to me and my political beliefs, and to the political beliefs of the majority of South Africa, both black and white.
Now consider this fact. The current president of South Africa is none other than Cyril Ramaphosa, who is from the South African Communist Party faction of the ANC. I'm going to let you listen to this entire video. It goes for 30 minutes, but it'll give you such an insight into the way the fake news, the mainstream media, portrayed the ANC as the solution going forward, despite the fact that it's a communist organization and all they wanted was undemocratic rulership over South Africa going forward. Here comes the video. I'm making this video adults only on YouTube. It won't be adults only on Loving Life TV. The reason I'm doing that is because there's some images there which are fairly graphic but not too terrible. But just to be on the safe side, this will be adults only on YouTube. Please remember to subscribe to Loving Life on YouTube to be kept informed. Please remember to register on lovinglifetv.com to be kept informed. That's where you don't have to have the age restriction. Please like this video, please share this video, and above all, please stay safe. Bye for now.
In recent years, a new phenomenon has entered world politics. Political organizations in many parts of the world show increasing readiness to resort to violence in the hope of achieving what they have not been able to achieve through negotiation. These terrorist groups are interconnected. They train in the same camps and receive support from the same governments. Even the slogans and phrases they use are often identical. Many of their atrocities are committed deliberately to attract media attention. For revolutionary groups, the more murderous the deed, the more certain of coverage. For the media, the more sensational the event, the more certain are high ratings. It makes no difference if the event was created simply to attract media attention. By such means, extremist groups are able to publicize their causes before world audiences, while more moderate groups are largely ignored. One of the growing number of countries plagued by terrorist atrocities is South Africa. There, the organization principally responsible is the African National Congress. Its present leader is Oliver Tambo.
The moderate blacks were not selling the papers. We were presenting a non-violent strategy, a strategy that did not say burn, baby, burn, a strategy that said people must come together and sit around a negotiating table. And this is not sensational stuff. It doesn't sell the papers.
It's a tragedy that most Americans only see or read about the dead and injured in South Africa, from terrorism, violence, and repression. But behind the terrible television pictures lies another truth. South Africa is a complex and diverse society in a state of transition.
In the course of our research, it has become abundantly clear that the situation in South Africa, for example, is very different. in many important ways than contemporary media orthodoxy would have us believe.
We have seen a lot of violence and a lot of bloodshed in the past, and I would hate to see a Africa built on violence and more bloodshed.
The Reverend Mr. John GOGOTYA is Director of Operation Advance and Upgrade, a black self-help association with 260,000 members. I asked him about the ANC's role.
The ANC is not the authentic leader or authentic voice of the black people in South Africa. It is one of the voices, yes. And secondly, the ANC does not represent the majority of blacks in South Africa. Unfortunately, the Western media and the media and the biased media has made it that the ANC is the sole representative. It isn't. It does not represent the majority of the people in the country. If it did, then there would have been no need for the ANC to embark on violence to win the hearts of the masses, because they would have had the masses on their side anyway.
What is the true nature of this organization? I asked Craig Williamson, a former South African intelligence service officer who spent 10 years as a member of the South African Communist Party, working closely with the ANC, many of whose leaders he came to know personally.
Nicholas, the answer is that the ANC is a terrorist organization, an international terrorist organization, exactly the same as organizations such as the IRA, the PLO, the Red Brigades, and the Bader-Meinhof gang. It is an organization made up of people such as the Joe Slovos of the world, people who have been trained in the Soviet Union as international terrorists, have been trained in Cuba, and have been trained in the Middle East to carry out the most horrendous acts of violence that I have ever seen in my life.
The Honourable Kim Beazley is a former cabinet minister and an elder statesman of the Australian Labor Party. He has studied the South African situation over many years.
The comrades are probably a minority, but a very determined and ruthless minority. And they have decided by terrorism to impose their will on the black community. And in fact, they have done so.
The ANC strategy was out to intimidate black moderate leaders. When the riots started and the violence escalated in the townships, the people who were targets were all professional blacks, teachers, doctors, lawyers, black businessmen. This was the reason why most of the black businesses in the townships were burnt down. And only those blacks who decided to fall in line with them were their businesses saved. And besides that, the strategy of intimidation was such that to scare the other people into the fold of the United Democratic Front and the ANC lager.
So that if you're a city councillor in Soweto, you got killed, or if you were wise, you resigned. So there are no councils looking after the roads or doing anything in the city.
All moderates are targets. This has been set up by the ANC themselves, that the black moderates should be eliminated so that they should make way for radical leadership. All of us are targets. We live in fear. We have to shunt around our children from school to school sometimes. We don't travel on the same road twice in the township. This is just normal with us in the townships. All of us, we know. It just may happen anytime.
Now, they are the ones who have invented the terror method of necklacing.
In this barbaric way of reprisal, a tire is filled with kerosene or gasoline, placed around the neck of an alleged collaborator, and ignited. The victim may be a black policeman, a teacher, a soldier, a civil servant. It makes no difference. The atrocity is designed to terrorize blacks into ending all racial cooperation and to polarize South Africa as prelude to a final climactic struggle for power.
Now, Franklin Son, who is the leader of the CAPETOWN, he's the principal of a polytechnic, an outstanding man, had said long before a simple thing which I think has to get into Western skulls, and I think it has to get into Oliver Tambo's skull, and that is people who dance on charred corpses have nothing whatever to offer South Africa. But what they are trying to do, or the people behind them are trying to do, because they're mostly ignorant high school dropouts, is to stop anybody having any conversations to make any kind of settlement with the South African government.
Even after the most preliminary examination of the facts, it is beyond reasonable doubt that the ANC is but one element in black South African politics. Many and various spokesmen for non-violent change were to be found. They speak with authority, reason, and very great courage. They spoke to me at the risk of their lives. Dr. Lucy Muvabelo is one of them. She has been active in the black trade union movement for more than 40 years and is a former member of the ANC.
You know, I'm one person who believes that you can lose so much through violence. This is what I told one Domini in Holland when he said violence should come to South Africa and this generation should die and the new generation will be born and they'll be free. I said, no. Bloodshed has never gained, it was never beneficial to anybody.
The reality, as we have already discussed, is that the South African Communist Party controls the ANC at this stage, and that the South African Communist Party wants a one-party, dictatorial, People's Socialist Republic in South Africa. In other words, they want everything that is an anathema to me and my political beliefs, and to the political beliefs of the majority of South Africa, both black and white.
In recent years, there's been a dramatic change. Black workers have been permitted to unionize, bargain collectively, and build the strongest free trade union movement in all of Africa. The infamous pass laws have been ended, as have many of the laws denying blacks the right to live, work, and own property in South Africa's cities. Citizenship, wrongly stripped away, has been restored to nearly 6 million blacks. Segregation in universities and public facilities is being set aside. Social apartheid laws prohibiting interracial sex and marriage have been struck down. It is because State President Botha has presided over these reforms that extremists have denounced him as a traitor.
But in communist strategy, you always see one thing. They look to see who is in the road to their path to power, and they are not about improving the conditions of people. They are about taking power. As Lenin said, the dictatorship of the proletariat is power. Power gained and maintained by violence, power unlimited by any laws. Now, who's in the road? Well, they identify, defame, and destroy. Now, the Zulus are a distinctive nation, 6 million people, twice the population of New Zealand. They have a king, they have a de facto prime minister in BUTHELEZI, who's also a member of the royal family.
Revolutionaries dare not allow the politics of negotiation to get off the ground because it spells doom, of course, for their own objectives. They do not want reconciliation in this country between black and white. They want a more deeply polarized society because that suits their plans. They want the economy destroyed in this country because they want a black population with a deeper sense of desperation. They are not employing violence to drive South Africa into a democratic future. In fact, they despise multi-party democracy, and they want only to grab power for themselves.
We have a lot of organizations within South Africa. We have a lot of leaders within South Africa who believe in peaceful change. We have Chief Mangope of Bophuthatswana, we have GATSHA BUTHELEZI of KwaZulu, we have Chief Cedric Dr. Patudi of the Northern Transvaal, Basotho. We have also Professor Nsanwisi and a host of other leaders who are for positive change, which is non-violent.
So they are identified for attack because they're totally opposed to the South African government's policy of apartheid. They believe that the remedy is by discussion with that government, just as the several million of the Zion Christian Church think the same thing, and of the independent churches do, and that within South Africa. And this creates a very large number of people who believe in discussion.
So successful has the African National Congress's public relations campaign been that those people in the West whom one might expect to have an informed opinion on who speaks for whom in South Africa show a sign of having that informed opinion. For them, there is only the ANC.
I can't for the life of me understand how Malcolm Fraser could make the statement that BUTHELEZI had no influence. While I was there, he decided to call certain meetings. He could get 70 or 80,000 people without any trouble in a stadium, or 100,000. And if he was worried about the comrades, he'd say, bring your assegais, that's the Zulu spear. And then no comrade came anywhere near them. Now, BUTHELEZI refers to Oliver Tambo and the African National Congress, which fights South Africa from outside, as the foreign mission, whereas he keeps on his campaign inside. When Richard Carlton said to him, he said, why don't you attack the South African government? He said, what, militarily, do you mean? He said, yes. He said, what, an unarmed people fight the most powerful army in Africa? He said, I oppose their apartheid. And of course, he, like Bishop Mawani and the others, believes that they'll get places by constant negotiation.
To judge from media reports and public statements by our leaders, the ANC is the alternative government of South Africa. It claims to be, and is widely accepted as, the only authentic voice of black South Africans.
Mrs. Mandela, I appreciate your time. I hope this interview doesn't cause you any problem. Thank you very much for talking with us.
With pleasure.
In South Africa, Mrs. Winnie Mandela, wife of Nelson Mandela, who, if freed and was allowed to stand for election and a free vote, would almost certainly be Prime Minister of South Africa. And we'll be back with more in just a moment.
Thus, over the years, the media have enabled the ANC to present Mrs. Mandela in the tragic role of martyr's wife. Nelson Mandela is serving a term of life imprisonment for sabotage and advocating the overthrow of the South African government. His wife, Winnie Mandela, is able to speak to the media. For foreign consumption, she presents a picture of reasonableness and non-violence.
I have never personally believed in any violence, and no sane person can believe in any violence.
For home consumption, the picture is quite different.
We have got in these hands our power, the people's power. We are not prepared for any so-called reforms to a party. The regime can go to hell. Power to the people! Power to the people!
We have stones, we have boxes of matches,
With our necklaces, we shall liberate this country.
Now, it's significant on this business of necklacing that you had Winnie Mandela, the wife of Nelson Mandela, saying, with our boxes of matches and our necklaces, we shall liberate this country. I can't see that it attacks the power of the South African government at all, except in stopping negotiation.
Well, as far as Winnie Mandela is concerned, to me, she was never really a leader. She has only gained the leadership or heroism because of her husband. It's just that, you know, the world is making people heroes of people that have not been known by us here in South Africa. The only person that I knew very well was her husband, Nelson Mandela, because I used to be a member of the ANC, the Women's League.
But Oliver Tambo himself said this, which is a mild slap on the wrist for the comrades. Of course, we are not in favour of necklacing. We don't like necklacing. But we understand its origins. It originated from the extremes to which people were provoked by the unspeakable brutalities of the apartheid system.
What do you say about that?
Well, I think that's absolute rubbish. I mean, we have a resentment against the whites. That's what this says. Therefore, we burn to death in the most excruciating manner possible fellow blacks. It's not really an attack on the comrades. He probably didn't dare do so.
By clever public relations and well-funded lobbying, the Western world has gained the view that the ANC and its leaders, principally Oliver Tambo, are reasonable men who have been driven to violence and terror. Similarly, much of the West has been persuaded that anyone who does not support the ANC is a collaborator and sympathizing with the South African government.
And for instance, your foreign correspondents based in Johannesburg. I hardly ever see them. They have, in fact, you don't have big rallies, such as those that I have. Only a couple of crews come. But you see, as far as the violence that is taking place in the township is concerned, you find that all of them go there and report that. I think that I don't say that that shouldn't be reported, but I think it's wrong to report just that, as if that is a complete picture, because that doesn't give a balanced and a complete picture. So I've found that myself when I was in the United States, that in fact, even where I had briefings with many of them, I mean, my visit in the United States, because I didn't say the things that would strengthen what they've portrayed, that my visits and my utterances in the United States were not reported at all.
I support the ANC in its objectives. I am trying what I can to save this country. And I'm not saying that presumptuously.
Unfortunately, Bishop Tutu is the kind of person that if he says one thing today, he denies it tomorrow. So he's a bit tough to pin down. What he says in Australia, he'll deny in England. What he says in England, he'll deny in South Africa. Now, and besides that, Bishop Tutu is also a person who has no vested interest. He said one time, and I quote him again, that he said, when violence does escalate to a point where he cannot stand it any longer, he and his family are going to migrate to some other country. So he is that type of a person. He has opened out a gate, on a side gate for himself, that if things get worse, he can get out. Now, I am speaking here as a black who has nowhere else to go. And I feel that the only way we can find a solution is a solution. And I represent millions of other blacks who, unlike Bishop Tutu, cannot emigrate somewhere else when things get worse. They'll have to stay here and face it. And the only way they can do that is that we, together with those in power and all the racial groups, should come together and work out a future South Africa.
Those who tell us the moral thing to do is to embargo the South African economy and write off South Africa should tell us exactly what they believe will rise in its place. What foreign power would fill the vacuum if its ties with the West are broken?
Africa, you are everybody's blue-eyed boy if you canvass peaceful methods, which everybody knows don't stand a snowball's chance in hell of succeeding. The minute you suggest something that is just likely to turn the trick, then very quickly you become an ogre. But I go back to saying Desmond Tutu speaks for Desmond Tutu. And those who want to listen to Desmond Tutu, do so. Those who don't want to, it's a free country.
Now, we have had a great deal of publicity from the visit of Archbishop Tutu. Archbishop Tutu is, of course, a very strong critic of the apartheid system and has gone round the world and then goes back to South Africa, where he is Archbishop of CAPETOWN and Primate of the Anglican Church. His advocacy of sanctions would be regarded with a great deal of doubt by the Black Mine Workers Union.
Sanctions would not benefit any South African. In fact, we'll be the losers. All what should be done is that we must be given equal opportunities by these companies from foreign countries and ignore the government's policy. During that time, there was job reservation. I said, even though job reservation is in the statute book of South Africa, foreign companies should ignore that law and employ every person according to his ability and his efficiency. And this exactly happened after 1971 when I returned from America, and South Africa was flourishing. By 1980, 82, you know, the indices were really booming. But then, all of a sudden, here comes people like Bishop Tutu, who then advocated for sanctions. And again, now the world took it upon itself that they were doing the right thing, that is to get rid of apartheid. We all hate apartheid. But at least people were now adjusting themselves to better conditions, better employment, better promotions, and better education. And now with these sanctions that have been advocated, to me it has spelled a death knell to a black man.
We do not believe the way to help the people of South Africa is to cripple the economy upon which they and their families depend for survival. Alan Paton, South Africa's great writer, For years, the conscience of his country declared himself emphatically.
I believe in the exercise of the moral pressure of America very much. Very much great believer in that. And I think sometimes Americans underestimate the amount of pressure that they can exert. But I would be totally opposed to disinvestment. For one simple reason, because I'm a Christian, and the idea of putting a black man out of a job because of something that I believe in, I couldn't do it.
Many Americans are very simplistic when they think that this can bring about change. And they are very simplistic in not examining the issue very closely. Because my brothers in the external mission of ANC believe in a socialist future. So they're not really concerned, therefore, about just toppling the regime. They regard the free enterprise capitalist system as a wicked system, as wicked as apartheid itself. And they would like to destroy it as well. So that they are not concerned about using this investment to bring about change in this country. They are using it, in fact, to destroy the capitalist system as well. And I think this is an issue which Americans completely overlook, that these people are using them to achieve their own objectives, which have nothing to do with bringing about change in South Africa, but which have something to do with setting up a socialist or even a Marxist state in this country.
Sanctions will weaken apartheid, and this will be a contribution to our struggle. When you give solidarity to us, you are not helping some needy, poor blacks in the jungles of Africa. You are promoting your own struggle in your own country, because the liberation of South Africa You are promoting your own struggle in your own country, because the liberation of South Africa will mean the weakening of international imperialism.
In that tormented land, the window remains open for peaceful change. For how long, we know not. But we in the West, privileged and prosperous and free, must not be the ones to slam it shut. Now is a time for healing. The people of South Africa, of all races, deserve a chance to build a better future. And we must not deny or destroy that chance.
After Mr. Reagan's speech refusing to impose sanctions upon South Africa, I heard Bishop Tutu, from his study in South Africa, say these words: the West, as represented by President Reagan, can go to hell as far as I'm concerned. That is something Martin Luther King would never have said about the West or millions of people or anybody's president. His goal was not to put people in hell, it was to keep people out of hell.
I think that the West might be as realistic as the so-called frontline states are. They are all supposed to be ardently for sanctions. They aren't. We are cutting out one South African Airways flight a week. The frontline states of South Africa, that's Zaire, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi and so on, have 186 flights a week into South Africa. And they have their aircraft engines maintained by South African Airways. And they actually, Air Mozambique actually leases South African Airways planes. So you have this extraordinary contradiction. And overwhelmingly their trade goes through South Africa. And they have clearly explained to the African National Congress, don't you dare sabotage Africa's railways, because from 66% to 100%, if you took Swaziland, that's surrounded by South African territory, has to be 100% of their exports and imports go across South African railways. And the British diplomat in Pretoria said to me the reason why Britain didn't favour sanctions was they believed that ultimately it would be the ruin of the whole of Southern Africa.
I believe that I have made 3 discoveries, simple but overwhelmingly strong, since coming to Africa. First, that whatever the ANC started out to be, it can no longer promise South Africans anything more than bloodshed and suffering of the vilest kind. Whatever its most well-meaning supporters may once have hoped for, or hope for still, should it succeed in its Marxist-Leninist revolutionary aims, all hope for a free, democratic and prosperous society will be over. South Africa will become one more squalid, bankrupt and ruthless tyranny, of the kind that countenances no reform and no criticism. Africa already has an abundance of these. Second, that South Africa is a profoundly religious place. I am certain that the great majority of South Africans want reconciliation through peaceful change. They see this as fundamental to the beliefs they hold. Nowhere is this more movingly shown than among the greatly wronged black and coloured people themselves. It is equally clear to me that we in the West have hardly begun to inform ourselves about South Africa. We have refused to see that there are millions and millions of moderate black Africans with brave, clever and long-suffering leaders, not one of whom is properly listened to by most Western politicians and most Western media. And this is to our great shame. Finally, too many of our political and moral leaders have accepted uncritically the authority and agenda of extremists who have no proven mandate from the black people of South Africa. What I have learned has persuaded me that the imposition of trade sanctions will ultimately destroy the possibility of a politically and economically free South Africa. But far worse than that, we will have on our hands the malnutrition, illness, despair and death of what may become hundreds and thousands of children and their families. Can we find the courage to admit we have been wrong?
They look to see who is in the road to their path to power, and they are not about improving the conditions of people. They are about taking power.